Indiana Hoosiers, man. I know you're not on the beat anymore, but as much as you're able to watch, but you knowing that this past Saturday was a huge game in so many different ways.
For sure.
Having
No, I watched. I camped out for that one. For sure.
Not last year they're able to stop the streak, which was great. But this year Purdue comes right back, and for the first time ever, they come into Simon Scott Assembly Hall as the number one ranked team, almost the unbeatable team, although they had been beaten once. But you got Zach Edey, whom in the second half we saw what Zach Edey is capable of and why he's just so difficult to stop. It was what they did in the first half, and Indiana put a great defensive effort on and disrupted Purdue's guards, forced them into turnovers, forced Zach Edey into turnovers as well, but just played the best defensive effort that they played all season, and it ended up working out well. They were able to hold on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and that's obviously a place where situation where Assembly Hall really helps you. When they're that jacked up and they're able to really, like IU, derives energy for it. They're running around, Purdue's a little bit on its heels. You saw stuff like Edey just dropped some passes. I mean, there were a handful of those. So that was definitely an issue. But just did a phenomenal job of creating turnovers, getting rolling in transition, and got a big enough lead they were able to hang on to it. And obviously make some big plays down the stretch when Purdue obviously came storming back, but they did a terrific job of building a lead, of taking advantage of all of that, energy, all the enthusiasm, just basically everything. And turning that into a win, but massive victory for them. Obviously one that is going to ring, basically is going to echo, in March. This is one that they're going to be able to, this is going to be huge on the resume. It's going to be a big deal for them, but, really strong performance. All the way around. I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino was terrific. I think, the Trace Jackson-Davis Edey, matchup was everything I think it was built up to be. I mean, I think Edey still comes out of it as the favorite for all the awards because he's just too large to stop. And I don't think Trace Jackson-Davis did anything wrong in terms of defending him or even that IU did, but he's just large. There's just only so much you can do with that guy. But I think Trace really, I think, did a good job of I mean, he was tremendous as well.
Just to give you an idea, I thought that Indiana played a tremendous first half defensively, and they did well offensively. But even with that, Zach Edey at the half had 15 points on 6 of 8 shooting, was 3 of 4 at the free throw line, had 8 rebounds.
Yeah,
and in only 12 minutes of play out of 20.
Yeah,
that's beyond efficient. I mean,
right.
So it was nothing that Zach's going to get his.
Yeah,
that's why you had to stop. But on the other hand, Braden Smith was 0 of 3 for 2 points. Fletcher Lawyer was 2 of 6. He did have 8 points in 18 minutes, but it was 2 of 6. They were 2 of 7 behind the 3-point line. They were 9 of 15 at the free throw. This is at halftime. They were 9 of 15 at the free throw line, and they had 11 turnovers.
Yeah,
that was except for the free throws, that's Indiana putting the pressure on. And they did a great job.
Mm-hmm. No, they absolutely did. I mean, I think the one thing that I feel weird about looking at this game and saying this is they beat the number 1 team in the country, and they did. Edey takes Purdue so far. I think there are a lot of other good players in that team. I think Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are good players, but they're not unbeatable guys. I mean, there was last year's team had more talent top to bottom. Obviously, they had Edey. Edey wasn't this yet, but they were playing Travion Williams along with him. They actually had too much, frankly. They had too many offensive options. They weren't good enough defensively. The role players who can defend better didn't get to play enough. And so there was a way in which this team was less complete, almost by having too many people that it needed to feed, between Sasha and Eric Hunter and Ivy and Newman and Gillis and everybody, where this team sort of has a better sense of what it's doing. But on the flip side, like there just wasn't that big of an like outside of Edey just being a guy that you can't stop. There wasn't this big talent disparity this time. Like they're not like like raw talent wise, Indiana has a better point guard. I think Braden Smith's a nice player. He's playing tremendous. I don't want to take anything away from what he's done, but like Jalen Hood-Schifino could be an NBA player next year. Fletcher Lawyer is a better shooter, is a more consistent shooter than anybody Indiana's got. But he's not like a light years better player. And Race Thompson's not, if he's worse than Mason Gillis, it's not by much. Almost every other position, Indiana was even or better at every other spot, other than center, where they have their All-American. It just happens to be that Edey is a larger human, and like he's not necessarily a better player. He's not necessarily more skilled. He's just bigger. So like it seems weird to think of this game as like harder for Indiana to win than last year, because last year the talent disparity was sizable. Like it was big. Like Indiana did not have any, like Trey Galloway did an astounding job on Jaden Ivey. And, like Ivey's going to be a really good NBA player, like top 5 pick. He's going to be terrific. So, it really says a lot about like that game was, I think, more of a surprise, but these guys did a really good job of taking advantage of the fact that they were not outclassed at most places, and did a good job of, again, using the energy that comes from Assembly Hall on a day like that to really get after people, turn those into turnovers, turn that into transition buckets, take as much advantage of it as they can. And then when they had to grind it out in the half court, they really did.
Well, here's some numbers that I just cooked up. Second half alone. Trey Kaufman-Renn, Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, and Caleb First for Purdue, a total of 7 second-half points. Yeah, between all 4 of those guys. Jalen Hood-Schifino, 12 second-half points by himself on 6 of 12 shooting. That's for everybody who was saying, it would be nice to have the Indiana kids and all that stuff. And, there's been that debate of, well, Purdue's got all these Indiana kids and they're just as good and yada, yada. The thing that you have to wonder now, though, where's the balance? Because while obviously the talent is, I hate to say it, but the talent is better. Jalen Hood-Schifino he's a 5-star. He's everybody thinks he's a better player. The numbers just showed. He was a big player on the big game day. He did it when he was supposed to do it, but he's going to be gone. And these other guys are still going to be there for Purdue. Yeah. And which is better? You pick your poison. You have to, as long as you could replace Jalen Hood-Schifino with that Jalen Hood-Schifino, that's fine. But if not, you're going to be in a hole next season.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and obviously that's been an issue back and forth the whole time. And Indiana's obviously had some scenarios where they've gotten the great player, the All-American that everybody wanted, and he was gone before it made an impact. Romeo Langford is an in-state player for which you had that issue. Trace Jackson-Davis, though, was a McDonald's All-American, Indiana Mr. Basketball, who's still there. You don't always know, what that's going to be, and you can only do so much when it comes to the recruiting process of saying, okay, like, how do I calculate this out? You got to decide just what you want for you. And Matt Painter has done a great job over the years of deciding what he needs, of what's best for him, of what fits what he wants to do. And you can't argue with the results. Again, obviously Indiana just won the game, but Purdue's number 1 in the country with, again, I don't think an obnoxious amount of talent. And they've managed to, turn this situation. It's a rough loss for them, but shoot, they could win the whole thing, and they put together a team that could win the whole thing last year. And they had, but they had a guy who was in state and Jaden Ivey, who, obviously he went to La Lumire's last year and became a big time recruit, but with somebody in the hundreds who ends up being a top 5 pick. So, they're, you never know how this is going to develop. And yeah, you want to get guys in state. You want to get guys who play in a system. And Indiana has some of those guys too. Obviously Trey Galloway fits that mold. Obviously Anthony Leo kind of fits that mold. You go after, you go after what you want, you go after what you need. You got to get some skill in there that fits. Purdue obviously really makes a point to make sure they have shooters. That is, a very key number one thing for the team that they build. Painter's thing is he's like, I try to get the best shooter in the Midwest, basically wherever, if he's from Ohio, if he's from Illinois, if he's from, St. Louis, whatever. I want the best shooter that I can get. And if he can defend, great. If he can't, I'll make him defend. If he's a guy that's generally just, that's not a lockdown guy when I get him, I'll make him functional by the time, he's a sophomore or whatever. And that's what we did with Ryan Klein. And that's what we did with Sasha Stefanovic. I like, you got to try to recruit the state. Obviously, this is still the number one reason to coach at Indiana, I think, is because that's your natural resource. That is your advantage. That's what sticks around, is that per capita, you have one of the best states at producing basketball talent. It's not a big state. It's not like, from a population standpoint, it's not like Washington, D.C. It's not like, California or New York or any of these other places that got a ton of guys, or even what Georgia's becoming. But you have, a lot of well-schooled players. So you got to take advantage of that. Like, you can't let that atrophy. You obviously got to go get them. But that doesn't mean, when you have an option in a Jalen Hood-Schifino, you take him. You have an option in a Gabe Cupps, you take him. And he's an Ohio kid, but he fits everything Indiana wants its players to be. If you've been around Gabe, or you've seen Gabe, or the Cupps family, they're going to love him. They're going to absolutely love him. Sometimes you go outside the state to get guys who, again, fit your mold. Ethan Morton is a Yinzer. He's one of my people. And Ethan Morton, I think, fits, what basketball fans in the state of Indiana want in their players. He's scrappy. He defends. He passes. He does little things. You can, you don't always, you can find other guys like that outside this state. They do exist in other places, I promise. But you got to go get what's there. You got to be in on every great in-state player, and you've got to, I think, give some benefit of the doubt to guys that aren't as highly recruited from the state, on the basis of they probably know the game pretty well. Give some level of credit for the coaching and just the culture that builds these kids. There's value. And so, obviously Indiana can never forget that. But, just by the basis of brand name, Indiana can go get a Jalen Hood-Schifino from Montverde Academy, and Purdue has a hard time doing that. Matt Painter, isn't super interested in doing it. He's done a great job building what he has, but I think Mike Woodson does think that there is capacity to go get some superstars, and it's not a bad idea. Again, you're in a position where you went and got Xavier Johnson. He was productive for you, as a transfer, but you lose him, and you need a guy that had to be ready to go right away and had to be ready to go be a leading scorer. And Jalen Hood-Schifino was ready. And if I think Braden Smith wouldn't have been a bad guy to have, but I don't know that you could have relied on him for, getting you 15 to 20 every once in a while, in the same way. I think they needed different things. Braden Smith is totally fine for what Purdue wants, for what Purdue needs with this team. He fits in with this group, and really the most important thing they can do is keep getting the ball to Zach Edey. Getting the ball to Trey Jackson-Davis works, but it's not the same as throwing it to a 7'4" guy. You're going to need to have somebody else get you some buckets, and Hood-Schifino's got to be that guy. So they're obviously balancing. You're selling something different in both places. There's going to be a different approach to start with. Bottom line, again, yes, they both should go after the state, but the fact that they both have different approaches doesn't mean one of them is wrong. I think both of them work for each program.